On to the tracing part of this process, and the one thing I'd like to point out to you first, if you want to make this easier on yourself, you can take the layout. The pattern we're working with is called Rudy Comes Calling. It's a table runner. It'll have a Rudy and this design on each end of the table runner. What I've done is I've taken and I've labeled each pattern template the color that I'm going to make it. This will make it easier when I start to trace and easier when I decide what fabric is what. So, for instance, we've got light brown antlers, light brown on the face, brown or dark brown on the body. This will be cream or light brown, brown trunk, and various shades of green on the tree. So then we're going to take, we've got that done, we set it aside. There are templates which are already mirror imaged. So we're going to take our Pellon 805 and we're going to begin the tracing process. Follow your lines as closely as you can. And letter them based on the letter of the template. And this is where you're going to also letter or indicate that this is brown. Okay, so then we're going to trace the next pattern piece. We would finish tracing it all the way. We're going to label it, this is piece L. And again, following the pattern layout, I can see that piece L is Rudy's body, and that's going to be brown. So we're going to just keep going through and finish tracing everything until we get all the pattern pieces traced. Okay, and now we're back. We took some time here. We've got these all traced out onto the Pellon. There's a couple things I'd like to point out to you. I've got all of the templates lettered based on the pattern so that when I cut these out, I'll know what pattern template piece goes to what fabric. A couple other things, I've left myself 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch around all of the pattern pieces. So when I rough cut these out and get them ready to iron onto the fabric that I've chosen, I'll have a little bit of room to deal with. It makes for better cutting when you go to cut the piece out of the fabric, and we'll talk about that when we get to that stage. The other thing I'd like to point out is sometimes letters, once you've cut the template out, you've got them all laying on your drawing board, it's easy to mistake them for another letter. For instance, the letter M. Depending upon how that template is laying on your drawing board, you might think that that's the W. Or the letter Z. If that's laying just so on your drawing board, you might think that's the letter N. So what I do is I draw a double underline under those letters, so that I'll know that that's a Z or that that's an M. Other letters that could be a little confusing to you are the V and the L, the small I and the small L. Just make sure when you're doing it that you'll be able to recognize what they are, and of course if you don't, you can always refer back to the actual pattern piece to make sure that you've got the right template and you're putting it on the right fabric. Okay, so now we're on to the next phase. We have our templates on the paper and we're going to rough cut them. We're not going to worry too much about how this happens. We're just going to make sure that we leave ourselves about 1/8 of an inch between each piece. And we're going to set those aside. That's a rough cut piece. We don't worry too much about how it looks. We're going to just keep cutting until we've cut all the pieces out. Precision is going to come later after we've fused these to the fabric and we're ready to cut them out for good. Okay, and we're back. We've taken the time, we have all our templates cut out, and then I gathered them by color groupings. So these are all the pieces that I'm going to make light brown. So then I went to my stash, and of course the first thing that I like to do is I like to look at my stash and see if I have any small pieces that will work for this. This is the best thing about applique. You can use up all those tiny little pieces of fabric that you didn't know what you're going to do with. In this case, the light brown, I have a fabric that I really like using for that because it has the dark brown that I'm going to use for the body and the light brown that I'm going to use for the face and the antlers. So I'll use one of my bigger pieces rather than some of my small stuff. I've already turned on the iron, and I'm using an iron that does not have any water in it. The steam is off. If my fabric is a little bit wrinkled before I start, I might go ahead and just try to get that straightened out there so that I'll be able to see really well. So now I know I want all my light brown pieces. So I'm going to try to make sure that where I place this is in the light pieces. But I'm also going to try to see, I know that I like to have some color value and change on all my pieces. It helps it look more three-dimensional. So I'm going to place that where I'm going to have a little bit of brown and then a little bit of the lighter light, so that when I put this together there's a little bit more than just a flat piece of fabric. So remember, I'm doing two of these because this Rudy the reindeer that's on this table runner, there's one on each end of the table runner. So now this is the part that goes on his chest, and I want that to stand out a little bit. So I'm going to get a little bit of that dark there. See how I've got dark in here? I'm going to pick up a little bit of that, and then I'm going to let it go up to light. I'm going to do the same thing on the other one. Then the other pieces that I have to go ahead and place, I'll move my fabric just a little bit here to give myself a little bit more room. It's going to go off the screen a little bit. I have the antlers, and they need to be light. So I want to use up some more of this light. And again, notice I got a spot here that's going to be a little bit darker brown. So down towards the bottom, that's going to meet on the Rudy head, I'm going to put that in that part. Okay, so now I have my pieces placed. You're going to want to go ahead and pay attention to what the instructions are for whatever fusible web that you're using. Alright, so now I have all my pieces placed. My iron is hot, and I've made sure that I know what my instructions are for the fusible web. So I'm going to iron this down based on what they are, and I literally count out the number of seconds that I'm supposed to place this on here. I'm not going to move it up and down. I'm just going to go ahead and get it on there and make sure that I count out the steps. And when I've got the number of seconds counted out in my head, then I move on to the next piece. And I count it out. And then when I have them all done, I'm going to go ahead and set them aside and move on to the next set of templates. I like to make sure that they are really cool before I cut them or before I take the paper off of the back. Now here's an example of a couple of pieces that I was able to find. One of my scraps. This is the tree trunk, and it's going to be a dark brown. So again, I'm looking at, I got the dark here at the bottom, and this lightens up a little bit. I want there to be a little bit of change in the value so that it doesn't just look flat. So I'm going to go ahead and place my iron on that, and I'm going to count it out. I'm going to set that aside. And I found another nice green that's going to be for the evergreen on the tree, and it's also going to make it look like there's a little bit of snow on there when it's all done. And that's one of my scraps that I get to use up. I have a hard time throwing fabric away, and most quilters do. So I'm going to put the iron down, and I'm going to count it out. And then I'm going to go on and I'm going to make sure that I finish all the rest of these pieces. Okay, so now we've ironed all of the pieces down. We've let them cool. And now we're going to cut them. And this is where we're going to use this more precision type scissor. This is my favorite. It's a Fisker's spring tension scissor. And this is now where we're going to care. First I'm going to just cut one out. This isn't a very delicate piece. It's got pretty straight lines. But this is where we're going to cut more precise. It's going to be right on the lines. The nice thing about this scissor is it allows you to really get into the delicate pieces. Takes good corners, makes good curves. And we're just going to keep cutting every piece. The more precise you are here, the better your pattern's going to go together. I'm going to set those all down. I'm going to get them all cut out.